But speaking of things that don't entirely make sense, I think we're ready for our last review of the night.
Yes. Bad boys, bad boys.
What you want, what you want, what you want to do.
Ooh. Ah, yes. So when we were scrolling through Netflix last week trying to find stuff to talk about, I noticed that the new Bad Boys movie, the fourth one, just dropped on Netflix, which was released this year, and I think was a modest hit. Um, and DB mentioned that he had not seen the first movie, so like, all right, so let's watch the first movie, and it was definitely a took me back to the mid 1990s very quickly.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to lay out some cards on the table here.
Hmm.
Had never seen this movie, had never really heard anything about this movie. And so it took me two tries to try to watch this. I was basically feeling tired and having some health issues this weekend. On my first stab at watching it, so I was very distracted and realized that was I looking away from the screen mostly for the last half hour.
Uh,
So I said to myself, okay, you know what, I'm going to give it another watch later.
yeah.
Um, so I basically picked up where I had lost interest. Um, but so at the time, I had the Netflix plan that was ad supported, which for some reason Sony movies are not part of that platform.
Yeah, and we kind of have some theories as to why, but it doesn't really make much sense to me.
No. So I did the math and said, well, it's cheaper for me to rent it on Xbox Video than it is to upgrade my Netflix thing for a one-off.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, by the time I was able to get back to trying to watch it again, my 48 hours from when you start the movie had expired. So
Uh,
I just said, screw it, and just upgraded my Netflix account for at least this month.
yeah.
Now, I tell this story not so much to complain, so as to lay out on the table. Might have been slightly grumpy on my first and second go around with this movie. So,
Yeah.
well, certain aspects of my feelings about this movie may not be entirely the movie's fault.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So Bad Boys is was the directorial debut of one Michael Bay. Um, and of course stars Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. Although what's funny with the poster is that Martin Lawrence is named first, even though he's on the right side of the poster.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? There's
Yeah,
also multiple versions of this poster I found online, some with and without that explosion.
huh. Yeah, yeah.
I will go
So,
with the explosion one because it seemed appropriate.
well, it's Michael Bay. Yeah, um, and uh, and it was also produced by the of course the great action movie production team of Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. Although I think this might have been either Don Simpson's last movie or one of his last movies.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so we have our titular bad boys, detectives, Mike Lowry, that's Will Smith, and then Marcus. What was his last name? I can't remember. Martin Lawrence. Marcus. It started with a B, I think. Burnett. Okay. Um, and they are Miami narcotics detectives. And one night, this group of thieves, led by this French guy played by Checky Cario, who's been in a lot of movies. He's kind of one of these character actors. They break into the evidence vault where $100 million worth of heroin are being stored, where Mike and Marcus actually got from a bus that they'd done. But the heroin gets stolen, so now Mike and Marcus have to try to get the heroin back, because the uh, police's internal affairs, of course, think that somebody on the inside helped them out, and they're about ready, about ready to get shut down and reassigned because of being incompetent. And and of course, during this time, certain hijinks ensue along the way. One of which is a very odd little uh, plot line uh, where Marcus Martin Lawrence has to pretend to be Will Smith.
Yeah, that was the one thing that struck me as kind of weird because so basically there's a woman who is a witness to a murder that occurs in the course of this investigation. So she's like prime witness,
Yeah.
and she refuses to talk to anybody but Will Smith's character.
Right, because yeah, and the witness is played by Taya Leone, who most people probably remember from a TV show called Madam Secretary. Um, and yeah, so she witnesses the murder of her friend, who is a uh,
Lady of the Evening.
lady of the evening. Yes, but she's also a friend of Will Smith's, and so yeah, so she's like, I don't want to talk to anybody else but Will Smith. But then uh, Will Smith's character gets waylaid, and so now so Martin Lawrence has to pretend to be Mike to get her, and to convince her to you know help out.
Yeah, and I mentioned this a couple times to Daniel. That seemed like such a weird plot for the first movie in a series
Yeah.
because that seems like something that you do once you've established who the characters are in a movie, and that's a sequel storyline.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because the 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 reason why it's kind of like it has this like comedic effect with it is because Martin Lawrence's character, Marcus, he's a family man. He's
Right,
married. He's got like four kids.
working
Uh,
class family man. Yep.
yeah, and Will Smith, Mike is this swinging, trust fund baby, who's got a woman a different woman coming to his place all the time.
Right. So you get some awkwardness with Martin Lawrence's wife thinking that something is going on, and him thinking something is going on with his wife,
Yeah.
and him having to explain. When he brings the witness to Will Smith's apartment, it's like, why do you have a picture of this man everywhere?
Yeah.
It's okay if you're homosexual. I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, and although I will say it doesn't really take her very long to figure out that there's something going on with the two of them. Um,
Yep. What I also thought was kind of interesting was that it being a buddy cop movie, like a prototypical odd couple buddy cop movie, they spend a huge chunk of the movie having nothing to do with each other.
yeah, yeah, that was yeah, especially like yeah, like basically like almost the whole middle of the movie. Yeah, it's mainly just centers around Martin Lawrence and with Taya Leone, hanging out with her, which was kind of interesting because for those who probably, for some of you probably it might be hard to believe, but at the time this movie came out, Martin Lawrence was a bigger named actor than Will Smith. And and
Which is
also,
just surreal to imagine.
yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, I mean, at the time, Will Smith, I think this was like one of his first movies, certainly his first action movie,
Mhm.
because he was still doing the Fresh Prince of Bel Air, and so he was goofy Will Smith. So seeing him, in an action movie was like, well, this is odd.
Yeah, so yeah, that's right. This is before.
Independence Day.
Thank you. I could just, and also before Wild Wild West. But the less said about that, the better.
Yeah, and well, he had Men in Black after that too, which was
Yep, Men
pretty
in
good.
Black.
Yeah,
Yeah, so this is yeah. I would imagine this is what put him on the radar of a bunch of people making action movies at the time.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, so the the movie itself is, I will say, like the style of the movie. I mean, Michael Bay has not changed really in the last 30 years of making movies.
No, I did keep thinking about how much this was like Pain and Gain, and
Yeah.
for that matter, the Island,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
in terms of its sensibilities. Yeah, it's basically big, bombastic, and crass. You have, of course, you have scenes at the gym with a bunch of attractive people in different states of undress doing thrusting activities.
Yes.
Of course, there's lots of sexy moments, although nothing really goes anywhere.
Right.
Um, and also you have what some people interpret as fairly stereotypical impressions of people of certain races,
Yeah.
kind of like Bernie Mac's character in Transformers One or
Yeah.
Transformer One, excuse me, the
Yeah.
first one, the Shia LaBeouf one, not
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
not the unjustly ignored animated movie that just came out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, strong points. When Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are together, they do have nice banter with each other.
Yeah. Um, I will say too. I thought the action scenes were very well done. Of course, I mean it's Michael Bay. Of course, you're going to get decent action scenes. And I will say that I thought the score on the movie was really good.
That was interesting. Like there were some parts that were more orchestral. There were some parts that felt like they were leftovers from an 80s action movie in
Yeah.
1995, just like some of the way the synthesizer was done.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I think negatives are obviously the whole subplot with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence having to swap lives. It seemed a little. I mean, I know they were trying to go for comedy,
Hmm.
but it was just a little, you know, a little weird.
Right. Again, I think they wasted the plot line too soon.
Yeah.
Like that again, that is a problem for the sequel when they are beloved household name characters.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, it- Personally, I didn't enjoy the action scenes as much, but I'm willing to chalk that up to being annoyed for basically paying for the movie twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and not being in a good headspace when I was watching it either
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to again, I'm going to say this is objectively a good, silly action movie.
Hmm.
Just I had subjective reasons that were dragging down my personal enjoyment of it.
Yeah, and I understand that completely. Like that's happened to me with a couple of movies. That actually happened to me with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Like
Mm,
like when I saw that first saw that in the theater, and I don't know why. I can't remember what it was, but for some reason I was in a really bad mood that day. And I'm
mm.
watching it, and I wasn't getting into the movie at all. And then I rewatched it when it came out on Blu-ray, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually a decent movie. So yeah, who knows?
Yep, maybe I give it another shot in a few years and love it, but right now I'm not exactly rushing to go see the sequels.
Yeah. Well, I will say, if I remember right, the second movie's like 2.5 hours.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Also, I need to do a little bit of crap posting with Holy Ninja.
Oh, okay. um, but uh, but yeah, I mean, I think overall, I obviously enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more than you did. But yeah, it's on Netflix, as DB mentioned, in case anyone's interested. Although, as
Not
he
on the
pointed,
ad-supported tier.
yeah, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, yeah. You'll have to get the full Netflix if you want to watch it there. But yeah,
Yep.
well, I think we've said all we need to say for tonight.